All right, thank you very much. So with that in mind, let's get started. I want to introduce our panel, and first, Art Benacourt from AE Benacourt. You're going to tell us what you do in just a few minutes. Also, Brad Walsh is the president of Orion Construction. Nelson Sanchez, president of Roman Manufacturing. Dr. Daryl L. Mucci, who is the president of Corewell Health West. And of course, Dr. Isely is here too. So let's start with this conversation, and let me just start here with you, if you would please. We'll just go down the row. I mean, when I say what you do, it kind of gives us an idea, but give me a clearer view of what it is that your companies or organizations do.
Yeah, so AE Betancourt, we're a talent strategy consulting firm. We help companies recruit and retain talent. We have clients all across the United States. Our headquarters are here in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And the best way to really describe us really is in our values, and that's we're passionate about employment, the impact and value that it brings to organizations, to individuals, and to our community. So when we engage with our partners and we engage in with our employees internally, that really presents itself about investing in our own people, acting as partners, asking more of business in terms of the community that we bring. And we really do it in a way that is transparent with organizations sitting on their side of the table. Primary industries, technology, manufacturing, construction, insurance, financial services. We're pretty broad. It's all professional and executive placement.
Great. Brad, can you tell us about your construction?
Sounds like you and I got to have a conversation. Orion Construction has been around for 23 years now. We are located here in the heart of downtown Grand Rapids. We are a commercial contractor specializing in all things commercial, from high-rise buildings to hospitality, and what we've talked about already today is multifamily. We are extremely busy in the multifamily sector, and we continue to do, or will be so.
Mr. Sanchez?
Nelson Sanchez, Roman Manufacturing. Roman's been around for a little over 40 years here in West Michigan and Wyoming specifically. Roman was founded as a transformer manufacturer for water-cooled transformers, serving the resistance welding industries, automotive, heavy use there. And over the years, after the '08 debacle, we realized we needed to expand and diversify our business model. And since then, we've been working to diversify beyond the resistance welding world and just transformers. And we've stepped into the power system space and serving other industries and other industry segments that right now has been hugely beneficial to us. Because we've broadened our footprint and have allowed us to step into some phenomenal growth.
And Doctor?
Hi again, Daryl L. Mucci, Corewell Health. So all of you likely know the name Spectrum Health. A year ago today, Spectrum Health and Beaumont Health came together to form Corewell Health, and that name is now rolling out everywhere. We have 22 hospitals across the state, 200 plus clinics, multiple nursing homes. We're actually the biggest employer in the state. Here in West Michigan, we have 11 hospitals in the 13 counties surrounding Grand Rapids, immersed in the community, as all you know, and I can just say it's been a tough few years for us. Pretty much everyone in healthcare, so I'm happy to talk about it.
And I think that's where we'll begin, Doctor, because we had a phone conversation. Most of us were actually a Zoom call, which is fascinating to listen to the challenges and the hopes for these businesses. But as you know, each of these businesses, Doctor, what are the pressures and what are the upsides for some of these different groups as we move forward in this year?
Well, this doctor or this doctor?
Yeah. Doctor, I'm sorry, Dr. Isely.
Not used to multiple doctors on the stage. All right, so doing it more broadly, certainly talent acquisition is going to be the #1 issue for the year. Maintaining and dealing with talent. We're back to pre-pandemic issue, and I know it's an old story, and I know that there's no good solutions, but that's going to be keeping him busy. Housing here in West Michigan just hasn't stopped, and so it's showing that the demand is resilient, and so that's going to keep, Manufacturing, given the diversified manufacturing fields that we're looking at here, is really strong. Manufacturing is going to weaken across the United States. It's going to weaken because people are going to be buying fewer things across the United States. But the good news is they will buy cars. And so that's going to help us here. And in the medical space, we have costs outstripping prices. So the increases that we've seen in prices have not kept up with the increases in wages for nurses, the cost of drugs, the cost of components. And so whether it's now or whether it's over the next 5 years, there's going to be consolidation across the United States that's going to continue in that space.
Let's start with talent, and I'm going to start with you because that's your job. Over the past 2 years, everybody in this room, I'm going to guess, has suffered from not being able to find the people to do the jobs that they need. And it's a matter of the right skills with the right folks, or just getting people to show up on a continuing basis in some cases is a problem. So what are you finding as a talent expert that tries to put people in all these different facilities? How do you attract that talent, and then how do you help them retain it?
Yeah, that's a great question. That has definitely been something that on the minds of every business leader this last 2 years. But what I would say is that there's always a need for great talent. What that great talent is looking for has been changing, though. You know, it used to be pre-pandemic, several years ago, you think of the millennial generation, they want culture, they want purpose. You know, they don't want to buy a house, all that stuff, all those things that we heard before. But we saw some extreme shifts in talent and what they were looking for. And primarily what we're seeing now is that the reason that people are moving, or the things that are most important to them in the job, are things like compensation. That's number one. And it doesn't have to be compensation in terms of extreme, right? You just have to be at table stakes at least. The second thing is culture and benefits. So benefits is not just healthcare. It's things like flex work, remote work options. And then the fourth thing is development. And I think that's really key as business leaders for us to look at, especially that fourth thing, because what's happening is what we're seeing with clients and just business leaders in general, they're fighting for those people that have what we call tools. They have this many years of experience in this industry, but what we're missing oftentimes is the talent and the personality. And it's saying, who are these people that are that already employed with me or not part of our team, and how can we invest in them, invest in our future for the needs that we have down the road, not just fighting over the same talent among each other.
Dr. Elamucci, I want to ask you this question because on our Zoom call, one of your questions was, where have all the tech workers gone? How critical is it in the healthcare field now when it comes to finding workers?
Yeah, absolutely. So staffing shortages is probably the biggest story in healthcare, at least in the last year. I'm going to separate it into two. The workers that you all know, the doctors, the nurses, there was a looming shortage well before COVID across the country. If you look at nurses, which are a vital part of what we do, it was projected that by the end of this decade, we were going to be a net shortage of at least a couple 100,000 nurses across the industry. COVID just accelerated it. So suddenly you had nurses that were retiring early, nurses that came into the field and decided it was just too much for them, too hard, they had other things to do. Then you add in childcare troubles and the rest. Physicians, it was the same story. So that has been a huge issue for all of us. And without doctors and nurses, not economists, but doctors and nurses, we really can't take care of people, and we need to. On the second side, behind all of what we do is technology, and technology more and more prevalent within healthcare. And we used to hire people within the greater Grand Rapids area, West Michigan, and so forth. Now those same folks can go work for Google, unless they got laid off recently, but can go work for Google remotely, can go work for whomever remotely. The world has changed, and so we're now competing in very different marketplaces with very different wage structures. So it's incredibly challenging in healthcare. And I'll just add one more point. The other thing about healthcare that you probably don't realize, even though we all believe that healthcare is too expensive and working to bring those costs down, our prices are more or less fixed over time. The federal government, Medicare, Medicaid, sets our rates. We're price takers, not price makers. Even with insurance, our friends at Blue Cross, those are long-term contracts. So when our wages go up suddenly, we can't make up for it like a restaurant where we suddenly raise the price of a chicken sandwich. It's a tough market for us.
I want to talk to both of you about talent in just a second. But Dr. Isely, I want to talk about something that you were talking about, and that is automation. You were talking about having a kiosk where you could order food or something, but you were talking about the automation in the healthcare industry. Can you talk a little bit about why that has become more affordable as the cost of labor goes up?
Yeah. So what we've seen over the course of the last 2 years is a breakneck increase in particularly wages in the bottom half. So we've seen workers go from 12 or 13 bucks an hour to 17 or 18 bucks an hour. What that's done is it's resulted in automation that didn't make sense to now make sense. Why? Because at 13 or 12 or 13 bucks an hour, the return on investment for a robot or something might have been something like 5 years. At 17 or 18 bucks an hour, now you can make your money off on that robot in a year and a half. All of a sudden, people who wouldn't think about using automation are. And so the real issue for us here in West Michigan isn't that firms haven't figured that out. It's that there's not enough firms to put the automation in place and train them how to use it. So it's going in as fast as they can, and they're using as much capital as they can to purchase it. They just can't do it as fast.
And Dr. Olmos, you tell the story about automation within the facility, because you actually started before that cost-benefit analysis and kind of gotten right, but it paid off.
It did. So we have something we call tug robots that are small robots. If you've been to any of our hospitals, you've probably seen them. They kind of wheel around through the hospitals, transporting goods, equipment, sheets, even medications. They're very sophisticated, and they, pre-COVID, made sense on a long-term basis. Now we only wish we had more.
Mr. Sanchez, tell me about talent and retaining talent in the manufacturing arena, given the changes that we've seen since the pandemic.
Well, the one thing that we know and learned quickly from the pandemic is we needed to adjust our thinking quickly. And a lot of the issues that we've found with talent retention have been in that skills gap that we all know has been around for quite a while. And we've launched initiative after initiative trying to help remedy that and skill up the workers. And so we've launched an apprenticeship program in an attempt to try and attract some of that talent, invested heavily. We've probably invested more in the past year in talent and development than we have in the last prior 5 years. So we're very excited about the things and the initiatives that we're taking to draw that talent in, and we've started to have a little bit of success in that. We haven't had too much problem in the white collar side of things because of all of the things that have been mentioned that you're trying to do and that things that you didn't have to do in the past to attract those people. So hybrid work, we're doing that. Flex schedules, we've done flex schedules at Roman since the beginning of the company, but now it's really a hot topic, but we continue to do that. So we're in a big, trying to scale up, adding a second shift. We started that in December, and trying to attract the folks for that has been challenging. Again, investing heavily in that side of the house of recruiting, retention, how do we position ourselves, and how do we attract those people.
And finally, let's talk a little bit about your business in construction and trying to fulfill, and we're going to get to the demand on your business in just a minute, but how do you keep enough skilled folks to do the job that you need, and how difficult has that been over the past 2 years?
Very difficult. Let's back up all the way to 08, 09. Back in 2008 and 2009, we lost a significant amount of workforce from the ages of 30 to 50. During the recession, they either retired, left the state, or just found another means of work. Now you couple that with the COVID, now it's twofold. Luckily, here in West Michigan, we have some great trade schools, one that just opened up, 131 West Michigan Contractors Institute. It's a great organization, and to answer your question, it's become more and more difficult as demand rises. You know, you can't take someone off the street, as willing as they are, you can't make them a master electrician, a master plumber, so it's a process. Now, on the positive side, I will say this, I've had more phone calls over the past year of people looking to change industries into construction because there is such a demand. So places like West Michigan Contractors Institute will be able to take those people and bring them up, excuse me, in a hopefully sooner than later.
I'm going to come right back to you. Oh, go ahead.
Just to add on, one of the challenges with talent right now is somewhere in the last 3 years, the word work has been redefined. And one of the big challenges is how willing are the new workers willing to work overtime. And there's just a different paradigm that the workers they're looking for 40 hours, no more. So you find yourself in a situation where you could have gotten by with hiring 10 people, now you got to hire 15. And so add that to the fact that there's a shortage of workers, it complicates the equation.
If I can add to that, you and I can't rely on, as often as people say now, work from home. That's not available in our industry. So to your point, that's one more challenge that we have to deal with.
Dr. Isely, we were talking about the workforce development, getting people here. Pointed out that we have a lot of young people coming into the area. That's good, but there are some young people who aren't coming here because there is in some cases a shortage of workers because you say they were never born. We talked about, explain that a little bit and tell me why that exists.
Yeah, I mean, the primary reason there isn't enough workers is they weren't born. What happened is that the workers that are coming up today are really the echo from Generation X. And there aren't enough people in Generation X for any marketer to ever care about. In fact, there's nothing there. They went straight from boomers to millennials, and they just glossed over us. So what happens? We have a small generation, and that small generation is having fewer children than the generation before, and it's resulted in a smaller group of young people today. And that continues until we get the millennial echo. So even though the millennials are having even fewer children than Gen X did per person, there's so many of them that it actually starts to turn that demographics for us near the end of the decade, but just a little bit. So realistically, our biggest problem is they weren't born. But we also have a problem with the fact that they've changed how they look at work, all right? And it's changed from, I want to make as much money as I possibly can, to, I need to make this much money. The difference there is, you now can say, I've made that much money, I don't want to work anymore this week. And that's what all of these guys are competing with right now.
Let's move on to supply chain and talk for a moment about what you were talking about, Dr. Isely. As the supply chain frees up, that helps the inflationary pressures, right? Mm-hmm. So you can get things. But I'm going to talk to two gentlemen up here, and everybody can weigh in on it, that are waiting a year to get some products. I mean, how quickly does that resolve itself?
Well, it depends on which market it is. Some places it already has, and some places it's going to take longer. So it depends on where they're coming from, what they're competing with, and do they have one part in them that is hard to find. And so what we're finding now is that as the supply chain is healing, that there are the haves and the have-nots. And if you're in the have-nots section, you're scrambling and still having inflationary pressures. And if you're in the haves, you're already seeing that you're having to have sales to get rid of stuff. And until all that equalizes, that's going to be the case. And we'd expect that for another year or two.
I just want to go down the line and have each of you speak to the supply chain issue. It may not impact your business, although the supply chain of workers isn't there. But we'll start with you, Doctor.
Sure. So in healthcare, probably unrealized is there are tens of thousands of different items that we use every day. Normally, pre-pandemic, about 50 to 100 would be on some type of short supply or back order across the tens of thousands. At our peak, right around this time last year, we had over 1,100 items on back order, and these things are really important. So these aren't, just an electrical outlet. We're talking about IV tubing, we're talking about antibiotics, we're talking about medications used to sedate people in the hospital. When we don't have them, we have to scramble to find other substitutes, and what probably is not really well understood is that to use these substitutes, we have to train people. Healthcare is very complicated, and so imagine a nurse in the neonatal intensive care unit who suddenly has to use a different syringe feeding system for a baby. If you make a mistake, you can overfeed, underfeed the baby and cause trouble. So we had significant disruptions across the supply chain. Over the course of this last year, definitely has improved, but there's a lot of still shocks to the system. With this most recent RSV and influenza surge, there was lack of antibiotics and all sorts of other things. It still hasn't stabilized for us. It feels better, but it's becoming challenging. And my final comment on this is just the cost of pharmaceuticals. While everything has risen, our pharmaceutical costs have risen far higher than just about anything else. And that seems to be kind of unabated from pre-pandemic and only getting worse.
Mr. Sanchez, you were telling me you have some enormous waits for some products.
Yeah, once upon a time, we had a reliable supply chain. And we measured our supplier performance, and we were 95+% on-time delivery from our supply chain. After COVID, if our on-time deliveries from supply chain went down into the 60s, 70%, and not to mention the outrageous lead times, happy to report a little bit of a softening, as you say, in the supply chain, or loosening up of that. Our on-time deliveries are now back up over 90%, which is great, but that 10% pocket is very, very problematic. And I didn't realize how many things had chips in them. And so the chip manufacturing and all the things that require chips are still probably our most problematic supply line. And then commodities, copper, we're a very heavy copper user, and the copper supply, that commodity, is just been all over the place and in tight demand. We've waited, as much as a year for product once upon a time here, and just when you think it's over, all of a sudden a new vendor pops up and says, hey, that thing you ordered 6 months ago, guess what? It's going to be another 6 months. Or next time you put your next blanket in, it's going to be a year lead time. So while the supply chain itself might be alleviating a little bit, the lead times may not be. So still a tough game.
And
you're experiencing the same thing in construction.
Yeah, absolutely. 52 weeks, I heard the other day, for electrical switchgear to run a building. Steel, for pre-engineered metal buildings, we were about 40 weeks. That has since come down to about 20. Good news, lumber has significantly come down in price, and it is, from what I'm hearing as of yesterday, has bottomed out. So good news. What we've done to try to get around some of these significant lead times and order in bulk is really front load these projects, buy materials when we can, with the help of the banks and our developers, to procure as much material as possible, so we don't have to worry about a 52-week lead time or things of that nature, to have it in hand, so it's there waiting for us.
I want to talk about some of the individual opportunities and stresses on your individual businesses. And I'm going to start with you. Dr. Isely, you've already talked about the fact that there were some workers that just weren't born. That won't pick up for a while. So what are the pressures that you're against? Obviously, I assume it is finding those skilled workers to start funneling out. What do you do in a time like this, when, as the doctor has pointed out, there's just kind of a built-in shortage of workers. How do you try to compensate for that?
Yeah, well, it's really about two things. First of all, there's something that we call the performance differential, and that's the difference in value that a high performer and a low performer bring to an organization. A low performer can cost an organization about 15 times their base salary, and costs that are low morale, lost opportunity. But a high performer can bring as much 200 to 300 times value as an average performer. And so what is important now more than ever is, first of all, defining what performance looks like, what a great person looks like, and being specific and going after that person that's going to bring value to your organization, and then pursuing them in a way that attracts them through what we call an employer value proposition. So why should that individual, let's assume they're successful where they're at, why should they leave there and come work for you? And the biggest thing that we have to work with partners and organizations with, and that we should be thinking about, is really answering that question of what is our value proposition, why should somebody leave where they're at currently and come work for us? What value are we providing to that employee for them to do that? And for so long, we've been able to get by without actually thinking about those things and just hiring people because the labor market wasn't as tight as it is now. But if you're gonna bring great people to your organization, you have to think about that and answer that question. And that's one of the biggest challenges we see is working with our organizations to do that.
Dr. Isely, you talked a little bit about housing. Can you recap where we are here in West Michigan? Because we're faring far better with new housing permits and some of that. And there's also a lot of pressure. 35,000 units short, is that what you said earlier?
Yeah, that's what the chamber study was finding, is 35,000 units short. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we do have a growing population here. We do have a growing number of employees. And so and we have a shift of people looking for single family over as much multifamily, or they're looking to move up in their multifamily. So all of that leads to pressure on housing prices. And so it's been amazing to see the housing prices hold up as well as they have. But the other side of that story is, as the interest rates went up, people got stuck in their houses. So if you have a 3% interest rate on your house, in order to ladder up to the next house, you need a lot more money than you did before. And so product has come off the market. So there's not enough product on the market. There's still people looking for it, and that's keeping the prices up.
So with that kind of deficit, I'm an entrepreneur, I've got a piece of land, I think I can put 60 apartments on this piece of land. So I come to you and say, look, I've got the financing, I'm ready to go, I want to get these apartments started as soon as we can. When is as soon as we can?
Well, that's a loaded question. So I'll say this. We have, again, 35,000 units. There's no way we're going to be able to accomplish that in the next 5 years. So what we've seen with the help of Lansing is a lot of tax credits and initiatives for the LIHTC and MISHTA affordable housing units, which is great. We're also seeing a big surgence in people are looking for, even though they can't afford to buy, they're looking for communities. So we're also seeing a lot of, market rate in more of a development or community. And so because of that, we're seeing a lot of townhome projects. To answer your question, you got an architect? Sure. You got an engineer?
We could.
Yeah, sure. Depending on the size and the scale of the project, if you came to us with, a set of documents, a piece of property, within a few months, we could get you in the ground.
But the fact is, you and many of your colleagues out there have a lot of stuff booked. I mean, there is a lot going on in the market right now.
Oh, absolutely. You ask any contractor in town, and their backlog is full. It's a great time to be in West Michigan, and I'll say this, it's not just the multifamily sector, but if you take a drive through downtown, I mean, you see the tower cranes. The publications, MIBiz, GRBJ, it seems like every other day that they're coming out with a new development. One of the things that I'll say that through the pandemic, the commercial real estate and the hospitality sectors took a significant hit. Now we're seeing a resurgence there. You're seeing restaurants come back online. You're seeing the Bob is back open now. Selfish plug, we're opening a moonshine company right down on Bridge Street. So there's a lot of potential, a lot of energy, and again, it's a great time to be in West Michigan.
Dr. Isely talked about the automotive sector being strong going forward, at least in the short term, with a lot of pent-up demand. What is the prospect from your perspective for your business as we look into this year and perhaps beyond?
So right now we're in the midst of a upcycle in the automotive. We're in the automotive tooling, and the number of new product launches, which the number of cars sold really doesn't mean much to us because we don't produce parts. We're in the upfront tooling side. So for us, it's more about the new product launches and the new models that are coming out. So in that automotive segment, there's been a mad dash for electrification. So we've seen a lot of projects over the last year, and our quote funnel is very strong. We see a strong first half of this year based on our quote funnel and our backlog. But we do see it kind of dipping in the second half. We're expecting and planning for a slowdown in that sector. Fortunately, we have other sectors and other markets that we're serving that are doing the opposite and that are still going great guns. But during this time of uncertainty, the whole working capital management is going to become very key.
You talked about the change to electrification, and Dr. Isely is going to talk in just a moment about how that may change the face of automotive in West Michigan based on our call that we had earlier. How easy is it for you to adapt, or how much do you have to adapt as the automotive sector changes, we believe, more and more to electric vehicles?
Well, for us, again, we're on the front end on the tooling. So when they spout weld car, whether it's internal combustion engine or a battery operated vehicle, the chassis still and the body still has to be welded together, and that's where we're at. So we don't see the electrification and the conversion to electrification platforms altering much of what the demand for our product is. We may have to come up with enhancements due to exotic metals and things like that, but overall, you still got to weld the thing together.
Dr. Isely, talk a little bit about the future of automotive in West Michigan, because it is changing, and you're talking about some family-owned companies that may be changing as well.
Yeah, so we have a lot of different pieces happening depending on how far we move down the electrification piece. As you go across West Michigan, we have a lot of exposure to powertrain components, so things that go into engines, things that go into transmissions, and those are the things that will disappear as we go into an electrified product. On top of that, we're coming out of the pandemic where we had fixed price contracts for parts, and we had increasing costs. So we had squeezed profit margins in a lot of the sector. All right? The combination of those two things means that we're seeing a lot of opportunity right now for M&A, where we expect that firms are going to combine and they're going to try and get the value out of their firms now. And the second scary part of that is that also means that we're looking at the high likelihood of a decrease in family-owned businesses here in West Michigan as they go to get this wealth and to get out of the business. They're selling to groups from outside of West Michigan, and so it's going to change the control of that business from what we've been used to over the last 50 years.
And think about that for a minute. If you think about the family-owned businesses that have contributed strongly to our community, that could change the way that looks too. Just something to kind of ponder as we go forward. Let's now talk about healthcare. You've already outlined some of the challenges, including finding the right people, finding the right product, but you also talked about something that is a constant now in healthcare, and that's consolidation. So talk to me a little bit about what the future of healthcare looks like for this year and beyond, particularly as we see, again, what were standalone, more or less, local hospitals that are now part of these really, really big groups.
So I'll start by saying I'm a cardiologist. Today's the start of American Heart Month, and unfortunately, and this is a bad thing for everyone, I envision, and we all envision, increasing demand over time. You don't want your doctor to talk about demand. That's not a good thing. And so there's going to be increasing demand, and in spite of the slide showing, and I was very happy to see folks in their 30s really well represented in Grand Rapids, across the state we see an increase in those 65 plus, and they need more and more care and more services. The challenge that we all have is there are massive fixed costs in delivering health care. Not only our buildings, but the infrastructure, and particularly the IT. If you actually looked at the paper yesterday, you saw that University of Michigan's health system was hit by major cyber attacks and their website was brought down. Just the cost for cybersecurity within healthcare, where a medical record is worth about 100 times more than a social security number, is huge. And so those costs keep escalating, and the best way to defray those costs is to get larger and to try to make things better for consumers and for patients. So for all of you that access your records on your phone now and are able to do video visits, those costs can be defrayed much more by a larger system that can consolidate those and still pay our doctors and nurses well. You will absolutely see more and more healthcare consolidation. For those that aren't in the industry, you might have seen probably the biggest shock to the system was Advocate Aurora, which was based previously in Illinois and Wisconsin, as systems that came together, just merged with Atrium Health, which is in North Carolina. And so now you have this massive system, about a $30 billion system, spanning with large geographic gap between. You'll probably see more and more. The question is will they deliver value for the community? Will they actually lower cost and improve quality? We are committed to doing that, and we're working feverishly, I assure you. I'm not so sure how this is going to go nationwide when you get these huge systems, though.
We have come close to the end of our time. Overall, I think we're running a little long, so it won't hurt if we wrap up a little early. But I would just like to go down the line. I'll end with you, Dr. Isely, and I'll begin with you, and just talk about your business or in general, because each of you, I hope, filled out the survey for the chamber and talked about your hopes for the year and what your concerns were. So I'm going to ask you the same question that was posed to the rest of the group. Tell me something that you're excited about in this forecast for 2023. And what are some of the things that might help keep you awake at night as we move forward?
Well, as a business owner, a lot of things keep me awake at night, but I would say the thing that I'm most excited about is that demographic chart that you showed here in West Michigan. I mentioned this before, but whether the economy is doing poorly or doing great, there's always a need for great talent. And I've managed organizations and teams, and even my own organizations, through highs and lows, and have seen growth, even through all the lows, because it's all about great talent. We want to hire about 600 people for our own organization over the next 9 years. And when I look at those numbers, I know the demand is going to be there for great talent nationally regardless, but what that tells me when I look at those numbers is my own growth. I can hire more of those people here in Grand Rapids to grow my own company versus going and having to open regional offices to find that talent. And I love Grand Rapids, so the more people I hire here, the better.
Agreed. Like I already said, West Michigan and Grand Rapids, it's a great place to be. You can see the tower cranes, you can see the development, you can see everything that's going on. Keeping me up at night, it's got to go back to labor. I talk to subcontractors on a daily basis, and the talent pool is just not there. So you take all the demand and all the development and everything we have going on. Every contractor in West Michigan is now tasked with how do we figure out how to do it.
Mr. Sanchez.
I would say mild recession to no recession in West Michigan. That's exciting. I think the demographics of what's happening with that talent pool, we're in a scale-up mode right now, and attracting. We've got the business is there, and now it's just filling the pipeline to make it happen. So execution on that is critical for me. So I'm very excited to see those demographics and the things that we've been doing, investing in talent and retention and apprenticeships and upskilling the workforce, really just that reinforces everything that we've done this past year to move that along.
Doctor.
And I'll say, I'm sick of the word COVID. I think we all are. And for us, it has just been really challenging because in spite of all these economic challenges, we've just had hundreds, thousands of patients we've cared for. So we've said 2023 is the year to heal the healers. We're going to be positive. We're not even going to think about the bad things anymore, and that's really bad business sense, I know, but it's the way to go forward. And as far as what worries us, just more viruses, more COVID, more influenza, more RSV. We don't see it coming, but if it happens, we'll be there.
Finally, Dr. Isely, I know you've given us your outlook on what we think is going to happen. We know how accurate those have been over the years, so it's well to take a look at these. But give me your 2 points. What's the high point that you're interested in this forecast, and what's the thing that worries you the most?
So the high point for us is that the resiliency in every way we calculate it, that West Michigan is going to grow faster than the U.S. That's a big deal. And it's pretty resilient to the different ways we looked at it. Even if the number ends off wrong, we still see faster here. What worries me, or that low point for us, is that we're coming out of a time that, you know, the word is worn, but is unprecedented. We have consumers who had huge balance sheets last year that are changing. They're reacting to prices and price changes that they haven't seen in 3 decades. And so we have to remember that economics is still about people, and people are having to react to things that they've never reacted to in their current lifetimes, and they may react in ways we don't expect.
Gentlemen, thank you all. It's been a great discussion. I appreciate it. Following with my long-held opinion, there can never be too many Ricks on stage. Let's welcome back Rick Baker from the Chamber.